Real Railroads, Episode 10, Foreign Power. Foreign power has long been a part of the real railroads, but it has become more common since the power pools became part of railroad operations in the 1970s. Then it was whatever power was available in the yard, leading to colorful contests even then. Now it's more regulated and sophisticated than that and is more complicated. There are a few misconceptions when it comes to foreign power. One is, oh, that train is BNSF in New York. I didn't know BNSF ran in New York. They don't. It's just BNSF power on a CSX or Norfolk Southern train, same as CSX or NS power in, say, California. Another one is that it is lease power. That can be true, but is not usually the case. Sometimes a railroad will lease power from a Class 1. New York, Susquehanna, and Western has in the past sort of leased NS power, although they are partially owned by NS. Many leasing companies have locomotives they have patched from Class 1 schemes. These are usually noticeable as having a large black strip through the railroad name. GECX did this to the former CSX GE units they purchased, and NS did this to the SD9043 Max they acquired from UP. There are many lease companies that you will sometimes see on Class 1 railroads, which some may consider foreign power. However, the majority of foreign power is run through and horsepower hour repayment. Now, how this works is, say, a Canadian Pacific crude oil train going to New Jersey originates in Saskatchewan with 3 Canadian Pacific ES44 AC road switchers. It would transfer to CSX in Chicago near Bensonville Yard, but would keep its CP power all the way to New Jersey and back to CP in Chicago. However, those three 4,400 horsepower CP units would have spent about 48 to 72 hours on CSX. Thus, CSX must allow Canadian Pacific to use 3 of their 4,400 horsepower locomotives, or some locomotives equaling the total 13,200 horsepower of the set of 3 for the amount of hours the CP units spent on CSX rails. Short lines and regionals are exempt from this rule. Which is why R.J. Corman and such can have CSX or NS power on their trains and not send equal amounts of horsepower to those railroads to use. No matter what railroad you model in the U.S., you can have power from any railroad in the era if it's after the 1970s when they were doing power pooling. An early example of foreign power was passenger trains. There actually were a few passenger trains before Amtrak that would change railroads without changing power, making for a quicker transition at terminals. In modeling foreign power, you can have basically anything except switchers. Switchers pretty much stay on their home rails unless actually leased, which has happened in the past. The foreign power is more likely to be road switchers, usually EMD or GE, as those were the dominant power when foreign power became common. There are a multitude of paint schemes you can have as foreign power, and they don't have to go with the era exactly, at least when you're talking about railroads that ceased to exist before your era. Railroads don't just repaint the power or predecessor railroads. They can usually renumber them with a small patch of paint, but sometimes not even that. SP, CNNW, and DRGW power remained on Union Pacific for many years, and some of those colors remain today, at least for SP and CNW. NS kept many locomotives from N&W and Southern in original paint for a few years. Their power could still be seen at least until 1986. In the 2000s, SP, CNW, and DRGW power without being patched for UP remained and could be seen on NS and CSX in New York. For me, modeling the Conrail Norfolk Southern Tier line will of course involve Conrail and NS power, and the short lines and regionals will bring more power on different parts of the layout. But the Delaware and Hudson had trackage rights on Conrail from 1976 until 1999, and then on NS until around 2006. When CP took over the D&H completely until 2009, when NS took back SK Yard in Buffalo and started running the CP trains with NS crews between Buffalo and Binghamton. So the CP and D&H power, along with STL and H power, will not really be foreign. However, NS operated a haulage rights train in both directions for Canadian National. Since it's NS crews on a CN train, that makes the CN power foreign power, along with Wisconsin Central, Illinois Central, and BC rail power that would appear on those trains and on NS trains from time to time. On a model railroad modeling Conrail, Norfolk Southern, Delaware and Hudson, Rochester and Southern, Genesee, Wyoming, Western New York and Pennsylvania, Livonia and Lakeville, Ontario Central, Buffalo and Pittsburgh, Buffalo Southern, South Buffalo, Wago and Hartford, New York, Susquehanna and Western, Baltimore, Ohio, Finger Lakes Railway, and a freelance railroad called the Finger Lakes Northern, I will have power of many different types from not only those railroads and leasing companies like FURX, First Union Rail, NREX, GATX, and HLCX, I will have power from other current and former railroads for the era. These will be Boston and Maine, Springfield Terminal, Maine Central, Norfolk and Western, Southern, CSX, Chesapeake and Ohio, Western Maryland, Pittsburgh and Lake Erie, Bangor and Aroostook, Grand Trunk Western, BNSF, Burlington Northern, ATSF, Allegheny Railway, Huron Central, Canadian National, St. Louis Southwestern, Southern Pacific, Soo Line, Ontario Northland, Union Pacific, Illinois Central, Iowa, Chicago and Eastern, Chicago and Northwestern, TFM, Dakota, Minnesota and Eastern, Wisconsin Central, Kansas City Southern, Denver, Rio Grande Western, KCSD Mexico, BC Rail, and Providence and Worcester, along with many other leasing companies. These are all decided on by looking through page after page of photographs online, getting the exact locomotives that came through the area in the correct years. And it's a huge list of not only railroads and leasing companies, but locomotives ranging from the little 44-tonner GE switchers to the SD90 Mac-H2, SSW, and SP GP60s came through here, as did DRJW, SP, and SSW tunnel motors. A model railroad with only one railroad is not prototypical, except with most independent regionals and short lines. Many modelers fall into the rut of modeling one railroad, only have one railroad's power. This would hold true in modeling a short line or regional, where you would likely only see their power, but not a Class 1, and even Class 2 and Class 3 railroads will get foreign power if they are owned by a larger company. Case in point, the Buffalo and Pittsburgh unit on Rochester and Southern. Perfect timing for that to come across. And that's a Wellsboro and Corning locomotive on Rochester and Southern. BNSF power on NS. Like Genesee Milling, which moves power around from railroad to railroad, resulting in Buffalo and Pittsburgh units being all the way down in the Georgia Central. And that is how foreign power works and how to model it. As long as you can reach the area you model, it could have appeared, even if just dead in tow, being moved to another location. There's some we have some Union Pacific genset switchers, which were built, or sort of built, in Dansville, waiting to be interchanged. We have a Canadian Pacific unit passing. 2 Canadian Pacific units passing. Especially if you have a rebuild shop, you'll get a lot of this stuff. Morrison Knudsen in Hornell, before it's now Alstom. But they rebuilt a lot of the Southern Pacific SD40 M-2s from the SD45Rs. Those were not only rebuilt from Southern Pacific units, but there were some that were rebuilt from Conrail units and Chicago Northwestern units. So we'll get Chicago Northwestern SD45s. There was a couple of Conrail SDP45s. I'm not sure if they were rebuilt to SD40 M-2s or not. I haven't checked yet. But you get a shop like that, you can have all sorts of locomotives that have been retired from service and are going to be rebuilt, or if you have a place that you can have locomotives just sitting there. And these could be locomotives that you just buy. They could be, you get around DCC layout, and you could have locomotives that are older that are DC. You can just stick them on dead tracks and have a locomotive shop or a scrapped. Cat's trying to cross in front. But that's how foreign power works, and it's a pretty basic explanation of how it works and how I will be modeling foreign power and the amount of foreign power I will have. Which is why it's going to take so long to build a layout, because there are so many locomotives that to get a good representation of the era, there was so much that came through that you have to represent all of it. You can't just leave out, I can't have that, and you got to have a good ratio. So that's how to model foreign power. That's why you see locomotives. There was not that long ago, there was somebody that commented that BNSF was running in some, I don't remember what state it was, but it was a state the BNSF actually does not run in, and they thought that it was BNSF because it was BNSF locomotives, and locomotives don't stay on their home rails. They roam around. It was just the other day, a Union Pacific unit was on a Norfolk Southern train with 5 other NS engines heading that way, heading toward Buffalo. And it wasn't a Union Pacific train. There's NS trains that come through all the time with pure UP or CN or NS power, and they're not CN or UP trains. They are NS trains that just happen to have that power. And then you have the people who are so strict that they model only one railroad, and then you have the people that just buy whatever and run whatever, and yeah, that's not for me, but I'm as its place, I suppose. But that's, if you want a realistic model railroad from the 1970s on, you have to have foreign power, and probably a decent amount of it to accurately represent. And you don't have to have it with another type of locomotive or with your home railroad. You can have 2 units from another railroad. There's another case of foreign power. NS leading. Unfortunately, the picture is blurry. It doesn't look that blurry from that distance, but you have an NS locomotive. You have an NS, that's a -9, leading a Union Pacific, probably a C45 AC-CTE or something like that, whatever the designation is for the ES44 AC. And then you have another NS train that has all NS power. There's a CSX train. Now we back up. No, we can't. You look right here. That's the orange is a BNSF unit. Unfortunately, missed getting the BNSF and got the YN2 -8, standard cab -8, which was a better catch than the BNSF unit, because those units are all retired now. But we have NS, DPU NS. That's NS power. Of course, that's CSX power on CSX, but there was some foreign power on those photos. I believe these are from the recent videos I had. Yeah, there's Amtrak. But I have another script that was partially written, but I don't think I finished it. So this will probably be the last Real Railroads episode filmed for today. So if you enjoyed that, and see you next time.